to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of Kevin MD. Rate and review the show at kevinmd.com/rate. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/follow. Today on the show, we have Brett Linzer. He is an internal medicine pediatrics physician. He wrote the Kevin MD article, "A Burnout Coach Saved My Medical Career and Possibly My Life." Brett, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Kevin.
We'll get into your article in a little bit, but first off, can you just share your story and journey to where you are today?
Sure. So I'm an internal medicine pediatric physician in a suburb of Milwaukee, where I've been for 22 years. I have a primary care practice here. And as part of that, I also precept and coach medical students from the Medical College of Wisconsin, fourth-year medical students. And I have the good opportunity of working individually with one of them for a whole month, almost every day. I also coach first and second year students in two different coaching programs that they have at the medical college. During my time here, I also served on the executive committee at our local hospital for 12 years and served as chairman of pediatrics, chief of staff, and chairman of peer review. My journey to coaching started in 2013 when life was very difficult for me. I had a number of personal and professional challenges that I didn't really understand. And I also noticed that I had a lot of negative emotions. The word burnout wasn't really, I never heard that before. And all I knew was I had anger, frustration, sadness, confusion, fear, and also boredom. And I didn't really know where to turn or what to do with those. All I really wanted to do was get rid of them. I just wanted them to go away, and I didn't know how. And all the methods that I use, the skills that I use from my training and from my early life weren't working. And in my article, I talk about how three of my physician colleagues and friends during my training committed suicide, including my chief resident. And I started to think, how am I different from those guys? Like, what is the difference there? And I wondered, did they feel these negative emotions? Were they struggling in a similar way that I was? And it wasn't that I had a major sort of crisis moment or attempt at suicide or something like that, but I didn't know where to turn, and I didn't know who I could trust. And really, I was just feeling kind of disconnected and overall numb. And at some point, I realized that my relationships were suffering, and that if I didn't allow or feel some of these negative emotions, I couldn't experience some of the positive emotions. And that was very confusing for me. And also at that time, I just started asking myself, what's wrong with me? I'm an introvert. I started to wonder, do I have a fatal flaw? Is there something about me that I can't figure this out? And all I really knew was something needed to change. I knew that if I continued on what I was doing, my relationships would break and life wouldn't be good for me. One of the few people I trusted at that time was my wife, and she helped me connect with a burnout coach, a physician burnout coach. When I first started working with the burnout coach, he made me realize a few very important things. The first was that I wasn't alone, that some of the things that I was feeling was very common among physicians. And that was very comforting to me, because I thought, again, what's wrong with me? Do I have a fatal flaw? He assured me that that's not the case. And then the other important aspect of working with him, he made me understand that there are patterns of behavior among physicians that I was experiencing. I thought I had all my special problems, and what I learned was that I was experiencing common patterns of behavior, and I can share a few of those with you today. But one of the key things was I realized if there were patterns, then I wasn't broken,
Mhm.
and that I could learn about the patterns, and then I can change. I can change my patterns and I can change my life. And that's exactly what happened with me. And so for the past 8 years, I've been working now with two coaches,
Mhm.
and I am a coach to the students, as I mentioned. And it's just been a overwhelmingly positive journey for me.
So you mentioned that you were feeling these negative feelings before you went to see coaching. How did that affect you when you were seeing patients and when you were practicing medicine?
Yes, those negative feelings affected everything about my life. I had difficulty and conflict with the triage nurse
Mm.
that I was working with. I felt tired, frustrated. I had more arguments with my wife. I felt overwhelmed in the clinic. We started a new EMR system at that time, and I felt overwhelmed. I was taking work home. I wasn't efficient. And then in my leadership area, I felt like there was a common pattern that kept happening to me, and maybe to other physicians as well. But it's where people say, "You're a smart guy. We'll put you in these positions. We won't really train you or give you
Mm.
feedback or help you, but you'll figure it out."
Mm.
And I found that over and over again. And true, I wasn't failing, but I really wanted to do better, and I didn't know how. And it wasn't until the coaching that I began to have the skills necessary to work with these feelings.
Now, what's changed over the years? What are some of the specific things that your coaches suggested or did to improve your situation?
So one of the patterns that I was experiencing was when I had a problem, I would just work harder.
Mm.
So I had frustrating problems, relationship problems. I would go in my office, close the door. I would read books on the subject. I would just work longer hours. I would just try harder to fix things because that's what worked for me before. And I learned that that was a an important skill set that I had in training and in my early career. But now in my mid-career, those skills weren't helping me. They weren't working, and I knew it, but I didn't know what to do. And what I needed to learn, and what the coaches helped me with, I needed to experience these feelings. I needed to understand them. Where are they coming from? Why do I have them? What can I do about them? And often they were about opening myself up and sharing my feelings with trusted people.
Mhm.
I was actually scared, I think, of my feelings. I didn't know. From an early age, I felt uncomfortable with strong feelings. And in my training, it became apparent to me that my strong feelings weren't really always welcome. And so my defense mechanism was to build walls around me
Mhm.
and protect myself and protect my feelings. But later on, those weren't serving me, and they were holding me back from my relationships with my kids, with my wife, with my nurses, with my patients, and ultimately with myself. And so the process of sort of taking down those walls and experiencing those feelings, that is what really transformed me. Some of that was related to some experiences I had in training. What would be considered and what people explained to me were PTSD, difficult experiences that I had that I just shut down. I didn't talk about them for many years. And that led to a sense of shame and a sense of holding. And it took energy to kind of hold that in. And so as I started sharing some of those stories and experiences with other people, which was hard at first, but I realized, wow, it did a few important things. I could release some of that shame and energy that was built up in me. And then it provided trust for other physicians. They can share some of their stories with me, and we could connect
Mhm.
on that level. And that turned out to be so important for me. And and then I found myself connecting in all these different ways, including the students that I work with. And so those are just a couple of the key learnings. I can tell you a few more if you like.
Sure, absolutely.
So there was this sense that I wasn't good enough, and then that translated into my actions. And in working with the coaches, what I realized was that's a common experience. A lot of people feel that way. I felt that way, and that I just needed skills to improve myself. It was my experience in medicine that I'm highly skilled in certain areas, diagnosing,
Hmm.
treating, pathology, but I'm not highly skilled in other areas, communication, running meetings, dealing with feelings. And so that was very important for me. And so when I started to learn advanced communication skills, meeting skills, then things transformed for me. I could change a problem that we had at the administrative level that took 3, 4 meetings, change it into a 30-minute meeting because I was more skilled and I could hone in
Hmm.
on exactly what was going on. What are the feelings? What are the dynamics of the group? This idea of boredom too. Nobody ever told me that I would be bored in
Hmm.
my job, but 12, 13 years into my practice and 50 or 60,000 patients later, I sort of knew what was behind the door. It wasn't as exciting. I
Hmm.
wasn't learning like I was back in my early training, and I missed that. And I needed that. The other couple things was it was difficult for me to accept positive feedback. When people told me I was good or they appreciated me, I would brush it off because I couldn't, it was hard for me to accept that. It was back to the days when I took a test, and if I got 95 right out of 100, I would focus on the five
Hmm.
and sort of beat myself up about that. And then there's others, but I think one of the key things was what I was saying a little bit before, that I felt like I had to have all the answers, that I needed or I had to portray an element of confidence and that I had all the answers. And that was instilled in me from my training, but that wasn't working for me in my relationships. What I really needed in my relationship with my teenagers, with my wife, with colleagues, was humility and curiosity and skills at communication and opening that would really help me and connect me with them. And so I practiced that and I learned that, and it's transformed my life.
We're talking to Brett Linzer. He's an internal medicine pediatrics physician. He wrote the Kevin Emily article, "A Burnout Coach Saved My Medical Career and Possibly My Life." Brett, when you work with medical students, this is actually probably the first time that I've heard someone work with them, not just precepting, but also coaching.
Yes,
So tell me the difference between the two when you work with medical students.
I think precepting is the traditional thought of I have information, medical information, and I need to give that to the student. They come to my clinic, we, talk about diabetes and hypertension and medication and things. And that's all very important. The other aspect of that is the connection and the feelings and the opening up of myself and modeling of behavior that is like, hey, I suffered in medical school and residency in these ways. I had these experiences that were very difficult for me. Have you had any experience like that? And that provides a trust, first of all, and then it provides a space, an opportunity for the student to open up
Mm.
and really share on a personal level what is happening in their life. So we can kind of meet sort of colleague to colleague, and that provides such a deeper experience and a willingness to learn on their part, a willingness to open up, and it's transformative. Time and again, over 20 years, I've been doing this. And I have 4 or 5 awards from students because it they tell me that rarely do people do that kind of thing, and I think it's really needed.
Absolutely. I think that we've had so many medical students on this show and writing on Kevin MD, and certainly they're going through a lot of burnout themselves and a lot of behavioral health obstacles. And it's wonderful that not only do you precept them in a clinic, but coach them as well. I think is rare, but certainly much needed.
Thank you. The other thing I think it does is it helps them with an emotional vocabulary.
Mm,
This was very important for me too, because early on, I wasn't really facile in emotional vocabulary. People ask me, "How are you doing?" "Well, I'm burnt out," or "I'm angry." I had 3 or 4 sort of, "I'm stressed." These are sort of common responses. But now I have such a more broad emotional vocabulary that I can really tease out, what am I feeling? And where is that feeling coming from? It, and then how can I transform that? It's a much different experience, and it goes way deeper, and it's much more helpful to myself and others.
And my final question, what are some of your take home messages that you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience?
My middle son is a sophomore in college, and he's on a path toward medical school and becoming a physician. My hope is that along the way, he will have help, he will have more coaching, institutions will be more open to the idea of emotional support for students and physicians, and make the space for them to allow their feelings to be there, to coach and train not just their intellect, but their heart and their feelings as well. The other thing that I really hope is that institutions build on this idea that coaching is important for physicians and students all along the way, that there's tremendous value in it,
Hmm.
and that it's really an important part of helping our current situation, which is in dire need, I think, of further support and help for physicians. I didn't trust too many people. I really needed coaching and other physicians to help me along the way. I know that some other institutions are supportive of this. They're looking for ways of developing it, and I would support that and encourage other physicians to tell their administrators and human resource people, this is important. We really need to do this. At my institution, they allow us to use some of our CME money toward coaching.
Hmm.
And that's partly from encouragement from a few people, including myself. It's been very helpful. And then finally, to just contact me. My email is balinzer1@gmail.com. You can put it in the show notes. And if you're interested in having me help you connect, I can give you information. I can listen to you.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, time, and insight. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it.